My name is Olivia. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a clerk in a convenience store here in Mobile, Alabama. I spend my day standing, attending to customers, scanning products, and dealing with the humid heat that seems to stick to your skin, even with the air conditioning on full blast. Mobile is a coastal city, with that salty smell in the air and streets full of oak trees covered in moss. I live in a rented apartment on the second floor of an old building, with creaky stairs and a view of a quiet street. It's not luxurious, but it's my space, decorated with floral curtains I bought on sale and a little table where I have breakfast, usually waffles with maple syrup and a glass of juice. I like my routine, even though it's simple. I wake up early, put on mascara and lipstick, slip into my blue store uniform and head to work, listening to country music on my phone. Sometimes I think my life is a bit monotonous, but it has its good moments, especially because of Ryan. I met Ryan 2 years ago at a bar called the Rusty Anchor during a local band's show. He was there with some friends, laughing loudly, with a beer in hand and a baseball cap turned backward. Ryan is a mechanic, 29 years old, with calloused hands and a smile that makes my heart skip a beat. That night, he came over to talk to me, a little shy, asking if I liked the band. We talked for hours, and by the end of the night, he asked for my number. We've been together ever since. He's the kind of guy who makes you laugh even on a bad day, but he also has his flaws, like leaving tools scattered around my apartment or talking about his ex, Madison, from time to time. According to him, Madison broke up with him about 3 years ago and disappeared from Mobile. Whenever he mentioned her, it was with a distant tone, like she was just a memory. I didn't think much of it. After all, she was out of the picture, right? My job at the store is tough, but I like it. The manager is a bit annoying, always pushing to keep the shelves organized, but my coworkers are nice, especially Eric. He's a guy in his 30s, works the night shift with me sometimes, and always has a joke ready to ease the boredom. Eric is the type who knows everything about everyone at the store, like a gossip radar, but he's reliable. We talk about TV shows, complain about customers who ask for change from big bills first thing in the morning, and he always teases me for ordering coffee with milk, even in the heat. Outside of work, my social life is more or less. I have a few friends, but we don't see each other much, and my family lives in Montgomery, about 3 hours away. So, I spend a lot of time with Ryan, watching movies on the couch or going to barbecues with his friends. My neighbor Patricia is another character. She lives in the apartment next door, a lady in her 60s who loves to complain about everything, the noise from my TV, a dog barking in the street, even the way I park my car. But she's not a bad person. Sometimes she invites me over for tea and talks about her life, how she raised 3 kids on her own and now lives off her pension and knitting. Patricia has this habit of talking about energies and strange things, like when she saw a weird light in the yard once and swore it was a spirit. I always laugh and tell her she sees too much because, to be honest, I never really believed in those magic or supernatural stories. I was raised in a Christian family, went to church every Sunday as a kid, and still pray occasionally, but these things about spells and energy never made sense to me. I think I'm too practical for that. Ryan and I have our plans. He wants to open his own garage one day, and I think about taking a management course to leave the store and find something better. We talk about living together, maybe buying a small house with a yard, but for now, it's just talk. Our relationship is good, despite some silly arguments like when he forgets to tell me he's going out with his friends or when I get stressed at work and take it out on him. Nothing out of the ordinary. At least that's what I thought until Madison showed up. I can't explain it, but when she came back to Mobile, something changed. It wasn't immediate, but looking back, I realize everything started with that pair of shoes she gave me. I should have suspected something, but who suspects a gift, especially from someone who seemed so friendly? It was a Saturday morning, about 6 months ago, and I was at the market near my apartment. the one with narrow aisles and a sweet, fruity smell from the ripe produce. I was pushing the cart, distracted, deciding whether to buy pasta or rice, when I heard someone call my name. I looked up and saw a woman smiling with wavy blonde hair and a floral dress that looked expensive. Olivia, right? I'm Madison, Ryan's ex. I felt a little awkward because, well, I had never seen her in person, only heard about her. She had a confident air, like she knew everyone was watching her. She said she had come back to Mobile to take care of some family stuff and that Ryan had mentioned me. He's happy with you, I can tell, she said, with a smile that seemed sincere. But there was something off about it, like her eyes didn't match her mouth. We chatted for a few minutes, nothing too special. She asked about my work, said she loved Mobile despite the humidity, and even laughed when I told her Ryan always leaves grease on my towels from working at the shop. Before leaving, she opened her purse and pulled out a pair of black high-heeled shoes with leather details that shimmered under the market lights. I'm moving. I won't take everything. These shoes are new. I've never worn them. I think they'd look good on you. I was surprised because who gives a random gift like that? I tried to refuse, said I didn't need them, but she insisted, saying she'd throw them away if I didn't take them. I ended up accepting, feeling a bit awkward, thinking it was just a kind gesture. I put the shoes in the cart, thanked her, and she waved goodbye, saying we'd bump into each other around town. When I got home, I showed the shoes to Ryan. He was on the couch, watching an American football game, with a soda can in hand. Look what Madison gave me at the market today. He furrowed his brow, a little confused, and asked why she was giving me a gift. I don't know, she said she was moving, I answered, putting the shoes on the little table. Ryan shrugged, said Madison had always been a bit eccentric, and went back to the game. I didn't think much of it. The shoes were nice, and I needed something to wear to a dinner we were having with his friends that weekend. I thought maybe Madison just wanted to be friendly, to show she didn't hold any grudges over her breakup with Ryan. Today, looking back, I feel so stupid for not being suspicious. That same weekend, I went with Ryan to a barbecue at his friend Jake's house, out in a more remote area with a big backyard and a grill that seemed to never stop smoking. I was excited, wore a blue dress I like, and for the first time, I wore the shoes Madison had given me. They were comfortable, and I felt even more confident in them, like they gave me a touch of class that I don't usually have. The night was fun with loud music, laughter, and Ryan pulling me to dance even though I told him I didn't know how. But on the way back home, I felt a slight tingling in my legs, like I had walked too much. I thought it was just tiredness, since I'd been standing all night talking to everyone. I took off the shoes, tossed them by the apartment door, and went to bed, not realizing that the tingling was just the beginning. In the following days, I went on with my routine, working, dealing with customers who ask for cigarettes or lottery, tickets as if I were a machine. Eric was working the night shift with me one of those nights, and we were talking about a horror movie he had seen with possession scenes that he swore looked real. I laughed, told him he was too impressionable, and shared about Patricia, my neighbor who always talks about spirits. Eric laughed but asked, half-jokingly, if I'd ever felt something weird in my life. Like what? Ghosts? I retorted, rolling my eyes. He shrugged and said his grandfather, who was from New Orleans, believed in things like spells and protection. I thought it was just talk to pass the time, but that conversation stayed with me, maybe because deep down I already felt like something wasn't right. By the way, Patricia invited me for tea a few days later. She was knitting a green blanket in her living room, with an old fan making noise in the corner. While serving the tea, she started talking again about bad energies and how we need to protect ourselves. Have you ever noticed how some people smile at you but want your harm? She said, looking over her glasses. I agreed, mostly to avoid arguing, and told her about Madison, the shoes, just to share. Patricia stayed quiet for a second, then said, I should be careful with gifts from strangers because sometimes they come with intentions. I thought it was just her exaggerating, another one of her crazy stories. But as I walked back to my apartment, with the smell of chamomile tea still on my hands, I started thinking about the way Madison smiled at me in the market. I don't know why, but that smile wouldn't leave my mind. That night, after having tea with Patricia, I lay in bed with the scent of chamomile still on my hands, but I couldn't sleep. Madison's smile at the market kept coming back to my mind, like there was something wrong that I couldn't explain. When I finally drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of those black shoes, shining in the darkness. But I woke up to the alarm before I could understand what it meant. It was a Monday morning, with the sun streaming through the floral curtains of my apartment in Mobile, Alabama. I got up, made coffee, and felt a slight tingling in my legs, just like I had after the barbecue at Jake's house. I thought it was just the heels, because let's face it, I don't wear shoes like that every day. I took a hot shower, thinking it would relax my muscles, and went to work, putting on my blue convenience store uniform, with the radio in the car playing some country music that made me sing quietly. The store was busy as always, with the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the hot dogs from the rotating machine. I was at the register, scanning products, smiling at customers, but the tingling in my legs wouldn't stop. During the shift, the sensation started to change, becoming a dull pain, like someone was squeezing my muscles. I tried to ignore it, leaning on the counter when there was no line, but it was hard. Eric, my coworker, was arranging the snack shelves, with his cap turned backward, and noticed I was acting a little off. We were in the soda aisle, with the fluorescent lights buzzing above us. "Olivia, are you okay? You're kind of off today," he said, laughing but with a curious look. I told him about the tingling, saying it was probably just fatigue from standing at the barbecue. "Jake's barbecue, right? I bet you danced until dawn," he joked, but suggested I see a doctor if it didn't get better. I mentally noted it, but thought it was an overreaction. That week, the pain in my legs got worse. It wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It felt like needles were poking my muscles, especially at night. Ryan and I had planned to have dinner at my apartment on Wednesday, a simple plan: pizza, beer, and a movie on the couch. He came straight from the shop, with grease stains on his shirt and that smile that always gets me. While the pizza was warming up, with the smell of cheese filling the kitchen, I sat on the couch, massaging my legs. The pain was so strong that I grimaced, and Ryan noticed. "Is it hurting again?" he asked, grabbing a slice of pizza. I told him it was getting worse, that it wasn't just fatigue. He frowned but said, "Try not to think about it, Olivia. Maybe it's just a pulled muscle." I tried not to get upset, but he seemed to not understand how I was feeling. After the movie, when he left, I lay in bed feeling my legs pulse, thinking I needed to make an appointment with a real doctor. On Friday, I went to a clinic in downtown Mobile, a place with white walls and a receptionist chewing gum while typing. Ryan couldn't go because he was fixing a car at the shop, so I went alone, clutching my purse tightly to distract myself from the pain. The doctor, Dr. Harris, a skinny man with small glasses, examined me, asked me to describe the pain, and did some tests, like pressing on my legs and asking me to bend my knees. "It might be muscle inflammation," he said, in that calm voice doctors have. He ordered x-rays and blood tests, and gave me a prescription for a muscle relaxer. I did the tests on Saturday, at a lab with the smell of disinfectant and posters about diabetes on the walls. When I picked up the results on Monday, I went with Ryan, who picked me up after work, with the car smelling like motor oil. Dr. Harris looked at the papers and said there was nothing abnormal. "Sometimes stress causes these things, Olivia. Try relaxing, do some hot compresses." I left there angry, feeling like he was treating me like I had made it all up. In the car, Ryan tried to cheer me up, saying it would pass soon, but Then he dropped the bomb. "Don't you think you're making drama?" That hurt more than my legs. "Drama? Ryan, I don't control this," I snapped, staring out the window as we passed the tree-lined streets of Mobile. The pain was now interfering with everything. At work, I could barely stand for the whole shift. The convenience store is small, with a counter full of lottery tickets and a radio that never plays anything new. I limped, trying to hide it, but customers started asking if I was okay, which made me embarrassed. The manager, Steve, a guy who wears striped ties even in the heat, called me into the back room one Tuesday morning. The room had a cluttered table, an old fan, and a crooked picture on the wall. "Olivia, you're slow. I can't have someone who can't handle it," he said, flipping through some papers. I tried to explain that I was in pain, that I was trying, but he cut me off. "Fix it, or I'll reduce your shifts." I left there with my heart racing, scared I might lose my job. Eric, who was at the counter, saw my face and pulled me into the cleaning supplies aisle, where the smell of ammonia stung my nose. "Don't mind Steve. He's an idiot," he said, handing me a soda from the machine. But then he told me that Tammy, a new coworker with red-dyed hair, had been saying I was faking the pain to get attention. "She said that at lunch in front of everyone," he admitted, scratching his neck. I was furious, but also humiliated, like it was my fault I couldn't work properly. Things with Ryan were getting difficult. He's great with cars, but when it comes to understanding how I feel, it seems like he shuts off. One Thursday, we were at my apartment, eating tacos we'd ordered from a nearby Mexican restaurant. The smell of cilantro and seasoned meat filled the room, and the TV was on with a baseball game that Ryan insisted on watching. I was on the couch, legs stretched, out, trying to relieve the pain, which now felt like it was burning, like there was fire in my muscles. I asked him to get me a glass of water because getting up was hard. He sighed, stood up, and said, "Olivia, you can't let this pain take over your life." I lost my patience. My life? Ryan? I didn't choose to feel this. Why don't you believe me? The argument escalated, with him saying I was obsessed and me shouting that he wasn't supporting me. I left the apartment, walking down the creaky stairs to the building entrance, where I sat on the step, with the warm night air and the jasmine scent from the front garden. As I tried to calm down, Patricia walked by, coming back from a visit, to her daughter, with a canvas bag on her shoulder. "Problems, dear?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. I told her about the pain, the fight, and she got serious. "I've told you, Olivia, some things come from outside. Those shoes you got? Who gave them to you?" When I mentioned Madison, she pressed her lips together. "Be careful, girl. A gift from a stranger can carry something bad." The next day, Ryan and I decided to go to the Rusty Anchor, the bar where we met, to try to forget the arguments. The bar was crowded, with sticky wooden tables and the smell of fries and beer in the air. The band in the corner was playing a cover of Sweet Home Alabama, and the colorful stage lights reflected off the bottles behind the bar. I was sitting on a high chair, drinking a soda with ice because the pain in my legs was so strong. I couldn't stand for long. Ryan was beside me, holding a beer, laughing at a story his friend Danny was telling about a car that caught fire at the shop. Then I saw Madison walk in, wearing a red dress that seemed to shine under the bar lights. She came straight to our table with a wide smile, as if she had been invited. "Olivia, Ryan, what a coincidence," she said, pulling out a chair without even asking. Ryan stayed quiet, fiddling with the label on his bottle, and I felt a tightness in my chest, like the air had gotten heavier. Madison started talking, with that confident way that made me uncomfortable. She asked how I was, said Mobile was more lively than she remembered, and threw a comment at Ryan. "Do you still come to this bar? Some things never change?" "Huh?" He gave a forced smile, and I noticed he was avoiding looking at her. Then she turned to me, with her eyes sparkling in a way I can't explain, and asked, And the shoes, Olivia? Have you worn them again? They're perfect for you. I replied that I wore them to the barbecue, trying to be polite, but my voice came out dry. The pain in my legs seemed worse just thinking about the shoes, like she had pressed a button. Madison stayed a little longer, talking about a clothing store she wanted to open in the city, and waved goodbye, saying, "We'll see each other around." When she left, I asked Ryan why he was acting so strange. "It's nothing, Olivia. I just don't want any drama with her," he said, taking a long sip of beer. But I knew something was wrong, and that encounter only made me more suspicious. That night, on the way back to the apartment, the pain in my legs became unbearable. Ryan was driving, with the radio low playing a furniture store ad, and I was in the passenger seat, pressing my thighs with my hands, trying to relieve the sensation of needles tearing at my muscles. "Does it hurt that much?" he asked, glancing at me quickly. I told him it was worse, that it felt like something was burning inside. He sighed, said I should try another doctor, but his tone sounded tired of hearing the same story. When we got home, I took off the shoes I had been wearing and tossed Madison's black shoes, which had been at the door, into the closet. I don't know why, but looking at them gave me chills, like they were more than just shoes. I lay in bed but didn't sleep well because the pain came in waves, and I started having nightmares. In one of them, Madison was in a dark backyard, holding the shoes and laughing, while I tried to run, but my legs were stuck to the ground. I woke up sweating, heart racing, with Ryan muttering that I was moving too much. At work, things were getting worse. The convenience store seemed more chaotic, with impatient customers and an air conditioner that never handled Mobile's humid heat. I limped so much that Eric started covering some of my tasks, like restocking the higher shelves because I couldn't climb the ladder. One afternoon, while we were cleaning the counter, with the smell of disinfectant in the air, he asked, "Olivia, seriously, what's going on? You're looking like a zombie." I told him the tests didn't show anything, that the pain was worse, and he looked thoughtful. My grandfather in New Orleans talked about things like spells, you know? He said sometimes bad things come from objects. I laughed nervously, saying it was crazy, but the idea stayed in my head. Tammy, the co-worker spreading rumors, made things worse. I heard her talking to another employee, Lisa, at lunch in the break room while they were eating sandwiches. "Olivia's faking it, I bet. She wants attention or a day off," she said, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Eric, who was with me, shook his head. "Ignore it, Olivia. She's like that." But those words hurt because I already felt useless. Steve, my manager, called me into the back room again the following week. It was a Wednesday morning, with the store somewhat empty and the sound of light rain tapping on the windows. He was sitting behind the desk, a pen in his hand, and said, "Olivia, I've told you I need you in the game. If you don't get better, I'm going to have to cut your shifts." I tried to explain, my voice trembling, that I was doing everything, that I was seeing doctors, but he just shook his head. "I don't want excuses. I want results." I left there with tears in my eyes, holding back from crying in front of customers. Eric found me in the parking lot during my break, where I was sitting on the hood of my car, the smell of wet asphalt around me. "You don't deserve this, Olivia. Steve's an idiot," he said, offering me a piece of gum. I told him I was afraid of losing my job, and he suggested I take some days off to take care of myself. But how could I, when I needed the money for rent? Madison showed up once more, and it pushed me to the edge. It was at a market where I was buying groceries on a Saturday afternoon. The market was the one near my apartment, with narrow aisles, and the smell of fresh bread coming from the bakery. I was picking out fruit, holding an apple, when I heard her voice. "Olivia, so good to see you." She was there, with a shopping basket and that smile that seemed rehearsed. She asked how I was, said she'd seen Ryan at his shop. Always so busy with those cars. Then, out of nowhere, she brought up the shoes again. Are you wearing them a lot? They're so elegant. I felt a chill run down my spine because the pain in my legs seemed to pulse just from hearing her talk. I replied that I wasn't, that they were put away, and she laughed, like she knew something I didn't. Well, if you need anything else, just let me know, she said, before heading to the checkout. I stood still, with the apple in my hand, feeling my heart race. That night, the pain was so intense that I couldn't even walk properly around the apartment. I tried taking a hot bath, with the steam fogging up the mirror, but nothing helped. I sat on the bed, with the floral curtains fluttering from the breeze coming through the window, and started putting the pieces together. Patricia had mentioned intentions in gifts. Eric had mentioned spells, and Madison wouldn't stop showing up, always asking about the shoes. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and searched for Spells Mobile, Alabama. I found websites about hoodoo, a common practice in the South, talking about objects blessed with powders or herbs to cause pain or discord. I read about jealousy, about people using magic for revenge, and I thought about Madison, about the way she looked at Ryan at the bar. Could it be crazy? I tried to tell Ryan the next day while we had breakfast in my kitchen, with the smell of toast in the air. Ryan, what if Madison did something with those shoes? I asked, holding a warm mug. He laughed, wiping crumbs off the table. Olivia, you're seeing things. She's not some witch. His laugh hurt me because I needed him to believe me, just a little. That night, sitting in my bed, with the light from my phone illuminating my face, while the wind swayed the floral curtains in the apartment. It was late. Ryan was sleeping on the couch after another argument, and I was reading those hoodoo websites, with words like curse powders and blessed objects spinning in my head. My leg hurt so much it felt like someone was twisting my muscles, and the image of Madison, with that smile at the market, wouldn't leave my mind. I closed my phone, my heart tight, and looked at the black shoes in the corner of the room, thrown into the open closet. It couldn't be a coincidence. Patricia had mentioned intention. Eric had mentioned spells, and I was running out of options. I lay down, but couldn't sleep because the pain and fear were louder than the tiredness. The next morning, a Sunday, I woke up to the smell of coffee that Ryan was making in the kitchen. He was in a good mood, whistling while scrambling eggs in the frying pan, with the sunlight coming through the window and illuminating the counter full of crumbs. I tried to bring up the shoes again, holding a warm mug. Ryan, I know it sounds crazy, but what if Madison did something to those shoes? Like something supernatural? He stopped, spatula in the air, and laughed, shaking his head. Olivia, you need to stop with this. Madison's just an ex, not a witch from a movie. His laugh hurt because I needed support, not jokes. I swallowed the coffee with the bitter taste in my mouth and decided I was going to figure it out, on my own. I couldn't wait for him to believe me. At work, on Monday, the convenience store was calm, with the sound of the radio playing an old country song and the smell of disinfectant coming from the freshly cleaned floor. I limped, trying to hide the pain, as I served customers buying cigarettes or sodas. Eric was on shift with me, organizing the candy shelves, and noticed I was worse. During a break, we sat in the back room with a table covered in papers and a coffee machine that always dripped. Olivia, you look terrible. Are you still in pain? He asked, opening a can of soda. I told him the doctors hadn't found anything, and a little embarrassed, I mentioned my suspicion about the shoes. Remember what you said about your grandfather in New Orleans? About spells? I'm starting to think that's what's happening. He got serious, scratching his neck. Look, I never took that stuff seriously, but my grandfather swore it was real. He knew a woman in Mobile, a healer, who helped with things like that. Her name is Emma. Want me to give you her contact? I was surprised, but wrote down the number Eric gave me, written on a receipt he pulled from his pocket. I didn't know if I really believed, but I was desperate. That night, in my apartment, with the sound of a car passing by on the street and the smell of jasmine coming through the window, I called Emma. My voice trembled, and I felt ridiculous. But I explained everything. The shoes, Madison, the pain. I couldn't explain. Emma had a calm voice with a strong Southern accent and said, "Sweetheart, this sounds like something done. Bring the shoes and come see me tomorrow. Don't wear them again, you hear?" I hung up the phone with a mix of relief and fear, like finally someone had listened. On Tuesday, after my shift, I grabbed the shoes, wrapped them in a plastic bag, and drove to the address Emma had given me, on a quiet street on the outskirts of Mobile, with wooden houses and oak trees covered in moss. Her house was small, painted a faded yellow, with a porch full of herb pots and a wind chime tinkling. I rang the doorbell, my heart beating fast, and Emma opened the door. She was a woman in her 50s, with graying hair tied up in a bun, dark, skin and eyes that seemed to look through me. She wore a printed blouse and a necklace with a black stone pendant. "You must be Olivia," she said, letting me in. The room smelled of sage and candles, with shelves full of jars of herbs, white candles, and old books. I sat on an old couch, with the bag of shoes on my lap, and told her everything. Meeting Madison at the market, the barbecue, the pain, the nightmares. Emma took the shoes, examining them carefully, and opened the inner lining with a small pair of scissors. A red powder fell onto the table, fine like talcum powder with a sour smell that made my nose itch. "This is gopher dust," she said, furrowing her brow. "Used in hoodoo to cause harm, pain, discord. Someone jealous of you did this. And I bet it was that Madison woman." My stomach churned. It was real. It wasn't crazy. Emma explained that the powder, mixed with bad intention, was connected to my pain, and a ritual was needed to break the spell. "Do you trust me?" she asked, looking into my eyes. I was scared, but I nodded because I had no other choice. That night, Emma took me to her backyard, where there was a circle of stones and a table covered with a white cloth. The air was warm, with the sound of crickets and the smell of wet earth. She lit white candles, which flickered with the breeze, and scattered herbs, sage, rosemary, and something she called John Conqueror root, around the circle. "Stay quiet and hold this candle," she said, handing me a warm candle that dripped wax onto my hands. The smell of burning sage filled the air, and Emma began to sing softly in a language I didn't understand, with a voice that seemed to echo. She threw coarse salt into a bucket of water and told me to dip my feet in, saying it would cleanse the evil. The water was cold, and I felt a shiver, but also a relief, as if something heavy had left me. Then, she burned the shoes, in a small fire, with the flames crackling and the black leather shrinking. "You'll pray Psalm 91 for 7 days, she said, handing me a paper with the text. "And don't speak to that woman, Madison, until it's over." When I left her house, with the starry sky above and the smell of smoke still on my clothes, I felt my legs lighter, like the pain had lessened a little. On the way back, driving through the dark streets of Mobile, with the radio off, I thought about what Emma had said about jealousy. Did Madison want Ryan back? Or did she just want to see me suffer? I got home and found Ryan awake, watching TV with a can of soda in his hand. I told him about the ritual, expecting him to laugh, but he just stayed quiet, looking at me. "If it made you feel better, that's fine," he said, but his tone was distant, like he still didn't believe. I lay down that night with Psalm 91 on the nightstand, praying for the first time in years, my voice trembling, asking for protection. I woke up to the sun streaming through the floral curtains, casting soft shadows on the bedroom wall. My Bible, open to Psalm 91, was on the nightstand, with the paper Emma had given me folded next to it. For the first time in weeks, my legs didn't feel like they were on fire. I still felt a slight ache, like an echo of the pain, but it was different. lighter, as if something had loosened. I lay there for a moment, listening to the sound of a car passing on the street and the hum of the old fan in the corner. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, where Ryan was rummaging around, probably looking for the sugar I always forget to buy. I got up slowly, afraid the pain might come back, but each step felt steadier. As I slipped on my slippers, I thought about Emma, the candles burning, the strong scent of sage, and the way she spoke with such certainty. Had the ritual really worked? In the kitchen, Ryan was leaning over the counter, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and his hair a mess, stirring a mug of coffee. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air because he never pays attention to the toaster. "Feeling better?" he asked, looking over his shoulder. I told him the pain was easing, that Emma's ritual seemed to have helped. This time, he didn't laugh, just nodded with a half smile. "If it makes you feel better, Olivia, then it's worth it. Just don't turn into one of those people who sees witches everywhere, okay?" His voice was softer, and I realized he was trying to connect, even though he didn't understand. I served myself some coffee, feeling the warmth of the mug in my hands, and decided not to press the issue. Maybe he'd never believe, but that was okay. For the first time, I was starting to believe in myself. That week, I continued praying Psalm 91 every night as Emma had instructed, with the Bible on my lap and the light of the lamp illuminating the pages. Each day, the pain grew weaker, until on Friday, I noticed I could walk without limping. I went to work, with a relief I hadn't felt in months. The convenience store was the same as always, with the beep of the register, the smell of hot dogs from the rotating machine, and customers asking for lottery tickets. Eric was on shift, organizing the soda shelves, and he noticed my face. "Olivia, you're normal again. What happened?" he asked, grinning. I briefly told him about Emma and the ritual, and he shook his head, impressed. "I'm telling you, my grandfather knew what he was talking about. This Emma lady's good." Even Steve, the manager, seemed to notice the difference. He didn't say anything, but he stopped looking at me with that disapproving stare. Tammy, who always gossiped about me, went quiet, probably because she didn't have anything to gossip about anymore. At lunch, while we were eating sandwiches in the back room, she even asked how I was, with a tone that almost sounded like an apology. Things with Ryan were also getting back to normal. On a Saturday night, we stayed at my apartment, watching a comedy movie on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. The smell of melted butter filled the room, and the TV cast shadows on the wall. He pulled me closer with his arm around my shoulders and said, "I'm glad you're feeling better, Olivia. Sorry if I was being a jerk before." It was the closest thing to an apology he'd give, and I accepted it because I knew he was trying. We talked about the future, about the garage he wanted to open, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. The pain was gone, and with it, that cloud that seemed to hang over us. Patricia, my neighbor, ran into me in the hallway a few days later while I was coming up with a bag of groceries. She was wearing a colorful shawl, carrying a plant she bought for the balcony. "You've got a different energy, girl," she said, adjusting her glasses. I told her the pain was gone, that I'd done a ritual with a healer, and she smiled, like she knew something. "I told you to be careful with gifts, didn't I? But I'm glad it worked out." I didn't go into detail because I knew she'd turn the story into a soap opera, but I thanked her for the advice. Back in the apartment, as I put away the groceries in the kitchen, I thought about Madison. I still hadn't crossed paths with her again, and part of me wanted to confront her, ask why she did that. But Emma had said to avoid contact, and I was afraid to stir up something that was finally resolved. A week later, I saw Madison at the market, the same one where she gave me the shoes. I was in the canned goods aisle, holding a can of corn, when she appeared, with a full cart and that same smile. "Olivia, long time no see," she said, as if nothing had happened. My heart raced, but I kept calm. I'm good. How about you? I answered with a firm voice. She asked about Ryan, about my life, and mentioned the shoes, almost like a challenge. Are you still wearing that pair I gave you? I told her no, that they didn't fit, and I saw a strange gleam in her eyes, like she knew I knew. I didn't mention the ritual or the pain, just said goodbye and headed to the checkout, my hands shaking. The next day, Ryan mentioned that Madison had stopped by his shop, saying she was leaving Mobile again. I thought it was strange. She seemed, nervous, he said, while we were having waffles for breakfast. I didn't comment, but I felt like her spell had lost its power, like Emma's ritual had cut any ties. Looking back, I learned to be more careful about who comes close. Madison came with a smile, a gift, but she brought something much worse. The pain in my legs is gone, my job is safe, and Ryan is with me, more present than ever. I still pray every once in a while, with my Bible on the nightstand, because the faith my mother taught me now feels stronger, mixed with a new respect for things I can't explain. Sometimes, I get a chill, thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't found Emma. But today, with the sun of Mobile shining through the window and the smell of coffee filling the apartment, I know I'm protected, not just by myself, but by something greater.